Hello everybody, this is Mithril Zenith, and today I wanted to talk about one of the most interesting features of Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, Fixed Mode. So, if you have been around in the Fire Emblem community, if you've talked about units and had unit discussions, you may have heard stuff like average stats be thrown about. What are average stats? How do they work? Well, the idea of average stats is that all units have growth rates. See, like Ike has 75 HP, 50% strength, 20% magic, skill, speed, luck, resist, defense, whatever. All units have growth rates, and that generally growth rates in most Fire Emblem games, actually in all Fire Emblem games, growth rates are the percentage chance that a stat will increase. Okay, probably most Fire Emblem games. Fire Emblem 1 calculates it a bit weirdly. But anyway, this is the percentage chance it's going to increase, but then because it's a chance it's going to increase, some people have much higher statted units than others. And so when we're trying to compare, like, okay, the average Ike will have, such and such stats at level 20, then it's useful to use something like average stats to say, okay, well, the average Ike Lord with no stat boosters will have about 33 and a quarter hit points, 14 and a half strength, 4.8 magic, 15.5 skill, so on and so forth. Now, this is useful for talking about units. It's useful for kind of judging units' average performance, but it's never really been a way to play the game, at least unless you hack it with using Nightmare or something. Unless you hack the game files and create an average stats version of the game, no one's ever really played with average stats. Enter Fixed Mode, a not quite version of average stats. Fixed Mode comes so close to being something that Fire Emblem players want, but then its specific mechanics break it wide open. Fixed Mode sounds great. Okay, character growths act more like points. They contribute to set values. Once you hit 100 points and a value, the next level up you'll get a bonus to that stat. And so, for instance, we'd say, 75 HP, that means plus 75 points. That means on level 2, 3, and 4, you should, not your first level up, but like your second, third, and fourth level up, you would gain hit points. And then you skip the 5th, and then you get 1, 6, 7th, and 8th, and then so on and so forth. In theory. We'll get to why that's not actually the truth in just a second. They give an example of Ilyana. She has a 50% growth rate. Her starting magic growth is 45. So the first time she levels up, she wouldn't necessarily get anything. But there are class alterations, weapon alterations, and item alterations. So let's get into those, and get into why those, while sounding interesting and cool, and giving you in theory a way to train your units in a better way, end up just causing an issue wherein, that all you can do is really... let's talk about it. So, one cool thing the game does in Fixed Mode is that it gives all characters starting growth points. This is to make sure that your first level up isn't always blank. This is to make sure that some of your level ups are a little bit more staggered than they would otherwise be. This is a good idea, I think, for any sort of average stat, like fixed growth rate mode. You don't want every character to have a 0 level up as their first level up, so give them some starting growth points. I like how Soren has 99 starting growth points in Magic. Just, on the off chance that you mess up, he's still gonna get Magic. And then 80 resistance. I think some of these starting growth points are really fun. But starting growths are a cool, good addition. That's not what I have a problem with. That's not what breaks Fixed Mode. Class alterations. So, if you are fighting... Is it just if you're fighting or if you defeat? No. If you're fighting one of these classes, your fixed growth rates will be slightly adjusted according to these numbers. So for instance, you're fighting a Myrmidon, your growth rates temporarily during that fight take minus 5% HP and minus 5% defense, but plus 5% skill and luck. What does this mean? Well, in theory, if you got 100 experience and leveled up from fighting a Myrmidon, your growth rates would act as if they were 5% higher in skill and luck, and 5% lower in hit points and defense. In theory, again. Equipment alterations is another way to slightly control it. Certain points of equipment are given benefits and penalties. So for instance, if you're using an iron sword, you would take a penalty of 5% to strength and resistance growth, but a bonus of 5% to skill and speed. So if you want to train hit points and strength, for instance, you would wield steel weapons. You also have the bands, which are items, not weapons, but items, because this game had a separated item and weapon inventory, that you would equip. You'd only be able to equip one, and they would take the place of like the Demi Band or Laguz Band or something like that. And they would give a small bonus. Mostly 10% to everything. The Night Ward is the only standout, which is 30% speed, but that also exists in the base game, and not just in Fixed Mode or New Game Plus. So, that's understandable. That's fine. That's a pretty good way of getting growth rates up, and it's in the base game after New Game Plus. What's the issue? Well, the issue is that instead of just only adding your growth points when you level up, it adds them constantly. But it adds them by dividing whatever your growth rate is times the amount of experience that you got from a certain action, dividing by 100. So your growth rate times the experience you got, divided by 100, and that ends up being the growth points you get. And since Fire Emblem Path of Radiance has a bonus experience system, you can decide just to randomly give 1 experience at a time, 2 experience at a time, 3 experience at a time, and rig the system such that you will guarantee, if you have lower growth rates, that you will always get a certain growth. Or contrary-wise, if you have a higher growth rate and you do it wrong, you can screw yourself out of growth points. For instance, if you have a growth rate that is less than 50%, and you give your unit 1 experience at a time, drip feed them, they will never gain a point in that stat. For instance, if you have 45% strength growth, you're giving them 1 experience at a time, they will never gain strength. However, if they have 50% or more, you give them one point of strength at a time, or 1 point of experience at a time, they will always get a strength growth. This happens for every single one of your stats, and so you can kind of min-max based on what your stat growths are to always get the best level ups. It is just exceedingly time consuming. This also messes with the system, as people rarely get experience in Fire Emblem in perfectly equal amounts of like 100 or 10 or whatever. You'll oftentimes get some fractional amount. And so, for instance, you're getting like 3 experience per attack with like Titania. You are going to have some stats that are growing slower than normal. You're going to have some stats that are growing faster than normal. And this is all just because fixed growth rate, fixed mode, is not actually fixed. I think the fixed mode was a mistake, and I think that most people agree with me. Also, you can only access it when on New Game Plus, basically. If you've completed the game at least once, you can access it. Which means a lot of people who only play the game once and don't play it a second time, well, they're kind of screwed. You know, they're SOL. They don't have anything going for them. So, what would I do to fix fixed mode? Make it a true average stats. Maybe, if you really want to have equipment alterations, you can have them, and then just calculate them on the kill that you level up. That means people are min-maxing what their final combat is, what their final combat is with, who they're fighting, in order to slightly adjust their growths. But I like the starting growth points. I like in theory, the growth point model. Just make it follow a more true to form average growths and stop giving us Stop rounding errors. I think my problem is not with the adjusted amounts. My problem is with rounding errors. So if you get rid of the rounding errors from fixed mode, it actually is a very good average base stats game mode with a little bit of player control. But with the rounding errors and dropping decimal points, it just becomes kind of a mess. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts on fixed mode are in the comments down below. Would you like a version of fixed mode or average growths to become an option in the following Fire Emblem games? Let me know. Subscribe to the channel for more Fire Emblem content, and until next time, this is Mithril Zenith signing out.